Hello and welcome to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, joined by PFF analysts and their own Andrew Erickson. As always, pretty much we are here today on this fine Monday to break down the draft. It is not past midnight like our last two breakdowns where we've had a little bit of time to actually, fact check some of the things. We're not burnt out from 6 straight hours of writing and stuff. And I got a lot to get off my chest, Andrew. So happy post-draft time. And Andrew, I guess the right word is happy freaking real fantasy football offseason. We finally got our landing spots, and it's time to adjust the old ranks and grind.
There's so much to unpack from all of the landing spots for all the rookies. You got veterans impacted. There's just a lot of stuff to go over. So let's get started.
Let's get started. So everyone, plan for today. Andrew and I go through, rank our top 5 quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receiver for 2021 only. We'll do some dynasty stuff as the summer progresses. Also want to look at which non-top 3-round picks we think we can make a biggest impact. As we've talked about on this podcast at length, over 80% of quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, top performing rookies are drafted inside the top 3 rounds. There are exceptions. 20% has to go somewhere. We'll talk about who the best candidates are for that. Also going to go through the biggest winners and losers from a team. Not even talking fantasy. We are capable of talking real life football on this podcast as well, people. So we'll see how that goes. But yes, thank you as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, and let's get it rolling. So Andrew, hit me with your top 5 QBs for 2021 out of this class.
All right. So my top 5 are Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Mac Jones.
Why Trey Lance 1? Because so we had Shanahan come to a presser today, and they did refer to Trey Lance as they thought the most pro-ready QB, which went a little bit against, kind of the thought where he might be sitting behind Jimmy G. I get it. Since 2010, we've only had 4 top 10 QBs start fewer than 10 games. So history tells us Lance will be out there. But, I mean, this isn't your typical team picking out number 3. And as much as we might not be thrilled about Jimmy G, in terms of his overall upside, he's still a guy that can carry the offense. I guess, how long do you think till Trey Lance is under center?
A month, maybe. Depends on how long Jimmy Garoppolo stays healthy. I guess for me, when I'm looking at ranking these particular players, again, the beginning of the year doesn't necessarily matter as much. Again, you win the fantasy playoffs down the stretch, weeks 14, 15, and 16. So, and you want to have these guys on your roster before that happens. So Trevor Lawrence, of course, is going to be the guy that's locked in to start for week 1, but that may not really matter as much. Again, this is something that I learned last year. I learned the hard way. I had so much Tyrod Taylor. It's just like an unhealthy amount of Tyrod Taylor. And if I had just drafted Justin Herbert in all those best ball leagues instead of Tyrod Taylor, I would have won so much more money. But because I was so focused on the front end of things and like, well, he's going to start and I like his situation. It's like, no, really think about it. Like when it's all said and done, Trey Lance is going to be under center. Justin Fields is going to be under center. And that's what really matters. Not so much, we have to project. We have to put it in this way. We need to, and the same thing with the projections. Like we have to do an 80-20 split with Garoppolo and Lance because that's just the way that projections work. But that doesn't necessarily help us so much for fantasy because we're like, no, well, only one of them can start. So we're going to start Trey Lance when he plays. We're not going to start Jimmy Garoppolo when he plays.
And that's kind of the thing about, people have talked about these rankings, competitions, like median projections, and you kind of see the best rankers year after year. They don't really make huge stands on guys one way or another. You do end up seeing it just being more on the safe side, and that's great for trying to win rankings competitions, but we're trying to win a fantasy football league, not necessarily get the median projection right. So you're right, Andrew. I mean, projecting that Trey Lance is going to be a QB2, probably outside the top 20 because he's not playing enough games, but we got to realize with some of these guys that when he is going to be out there, he's going to be much closer to the QB1. I think Lance should probably be the dynasty QB1, I think, at this point. Can we go there? Nathan Yonke did over at PFF.com. He is just so fantasy friendly, people. He only had 1 game out of 19, his last 19 games. Only once did he not find the end zone as a rusher or clear at least 40 yards. There's a reason why we called him Taysom Hill with actual arm talent in our PFF draft guide. I would say, so you have Fields too?
Yeah, so I went back and forth with Fields and Lawrence at number 2. I think that they're really close, but I just look back at the rushing upside. And again, I know Lawrence has it, but Justin Fields has more of it. And that's what matters. Look, if you look at rankings right now, just look at Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts versus Joe Burrow, right? We're having this conversation heading into last year. okay, who's better? Okay, everyone's going to say Joe Burrow. Everyone's drafting Joe Burrow. No one's drafting Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is now going ahead of Joe Burrow. Like, it doesn't matter who's actually better in real life. So if you say Trevor Lawrence is better than Justin Fields in real life, okay, like that's fine. The Jaguars clearly think that. But a lot of people, number one, don't think that. A lot of people thought it was really 1A and 1B. And if it's really that close, then I'm going to go to the guy that's going to turn to his legs more often than not. And also, some of this Urban Meyer stuff has kind of got me less than enthused about how this offense is going to look out. So, yeah, Justin Fields for me, I think just kind of at 2.
I saw the rap sheet report saying how the Bears want this to be like their Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes situation. Like, okay, people, first of all, quit citing Pro Bowls. The Pro Bowl stopped meaning a damn thing when Trevor Siemian declined his invitation like 5 years ago. So don't sell me on Pro Bowls. Dalton literally just got to Chicago. Like, what is there? You just traded up for Fields. What's your benefit? Has Dalton even like been inside the team walls to this point? Like, does he even have a better relationship with the players than Fields does? It's not even close to the same thing, man. Alex Smith was in KC, not doing amazing, but like leading a competitive football team every year. And then he played the best season of his career once freaking they got Tyreek Hill in 2017. And obviously Patrick Mahomes was there sitting there on the bench for 1 year. So, man, oh, man, I hate that comparison. I hate the idea that Fields could spend even a week on the bench. But to your point, I am confident ranking Fields 1 for all that rushing upside. I mean, look, I know it took Josh Allen until 2020 to become a great real-life quarterback. He was already great in fantasy the 2 previous years. We need to separate in draft season. You know, we've all been seeing the rankings. Trevor Lawrence 1. He should be 1. He was 1 for a reason. But in fantasy, people, different game. Unfortunately, doesn't always line up with what we see in reality, but we need to react. Otherwise, look, Mac Jones is 5th. Don't draft him to your teams, people. He just doesn't run enough. Now, he was a little more athletic than I guess we thought at the combine. So he can pick up 8 yards if it's there, but 42 rushing yards in 30 career games. That's not exactly a fantasy-friendly rushing floor. As we've seen at rookie QBs, it's going to be tough for them to really have high-end passing efficiency from the get-go. And finally, Andrew, it's Zach Wilson. So just came off an Underdog fantasy stream with Josh Norris. Great product, great guy. But we're talking about the Jets, man. And if you look at these large field tournaments and you want to be contrarian, you want to pick someone that everyone else is going to be on, I think the Jets make a lot of sense as an offensive stack because not many people want them. And because of that, you're getting all these guys at their floor. Like, we're going to have to draft Fields, draft Lawrence as QB, probably 13 to 15 range because we're hoping that they're going to be up there. We can get Wilson a good 10 QBs later at this point. So we've known he's going to the Jets for really months at this point. He's still falling down. Corey Davis, Denzel Mims, Elijah Moore, even my guy, Chris Herndon, who we'll talk more about later. Like, there are weapons in place, and the defense still sucks enough that Wilson could put it together. I have him ranked 4-2. I'm not overly bullish on Zach Wilson this year, but just in terms of being able to draft a guy at their floor, I think that almost the entire Jets offense qualifies.
Yeah, Corey Davis was someone that I had wrote up after he signed with the Jets as someone that I didn't like. I didn't really like the landing spot. I didn't think that he could really be a number 1, and then you realize he's the wide receiver 50 or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, clearly I don't like him as much as everybody else does. So I guess I'll draft Corey Davis. But again, yeah, they're all going too late. And it's just the stigma about the Jets. Everyone still thinks, I mean, like, if you ask half the people who play best ball, it's like, oh yeah, Adam Gase's still on the team. Like, he's like his aurora, his stench that he's left there just lets this impact on us. All the prayer yards we chased last year are just, it's so hard to go back to it. But again, it's coming from a different quarterback this time. And Zach Wilson has a really talented arm. So he should be able to make some throws downfield. That's good for Elijah Moore, good for Denzel Mims. So, and look, the defense, again, Robert Saleh is there, but the personnel, especially in the secondary, I mean, their cornerbacks are still looking mighty, mighty shaky. They didn't draft any defensive players until day 3. I mean, they went all offense because I think they know it's like, well, we're going to hope the coaching really just kind of comes through here because we need to focus on offensive personnel first. So I think the defense is still going to be pretty shaky, and they're going to be trailing in a lot of games.
And again, people, so once this gets twisted where, a social media graphic comes out where Ian Hartitz told you to don't leave your drafts without Jets players, like, I'm not asking you to pick between like Corey Davis and, like Deontay Johnson. You're picking between Corey Davis and like some rookie that hasn't even been inside their team's walls yet. So remember, we don't hate players. We hate ADPs. And right now, all those Jets ADPs are not worth hating. Moving on to running backs. So I want to go off for a second on some of this backlash towards Steelers RB1 Najee Harris. And honestly, Joe Mixon too. I've been talking about these guys and the amount of replies I'm seeing where they're like, oh, check the O-line, bro. How many there are more O-line experts on fantasy Twitter than I have ever seen at this point that not only, I guess, can read to 2020 stats, but also project forward to 2021. I understand the Steelers do not have a good O-line. I wish they would have done a better job improving it this offseason. It just doesn't matter as nearly as much as we think it does in fantasy. And also don't over exaggerate our own ability to properly assess what's going on with these offensive lines. Because look at last year, because everyone wants to say Steelers were 31st in PFF run blocking grade. Let's take a look at the other running backs that were on these bad run blocking units. Let's see how that went. Austin Eckler on the dead worst offensive line, RB11 in PPR points per game. Myles Gaskin on the Dolphins, who ranked 30th, was RB12. Ezekiel Elliott was RB16. Melvin Gordon, RB23. David Johnson, RB15. Josh Jacobs, RB14. James Robinson, RB6. People, did James Robinson do so well last year because he was truly just this incredible talent that defenses had no answer for on the 1-15 Jaguars, but James Robinson just, no one ever had an answer for him, even though they knew that's where the ball was going? No, he did it because Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry had more touches than him, and that was it before he got hurt. Only 4 running backs had at least 300 touches last season. It's just become more rare than ever to get that 3-down workhorse, and Najee Harris fits that mold. So, yes, the O-line isn't great, but Najee, one of the best catch radiuses we have seen from a running back. Anybody's idea of a great pass catcher, he's going to have more than enough volume to return likely RB1 value, man. Andrew, we talked about this post-draft. We have him kind of ranked RB15, RB16 right now, but the more I look at it, man, he's definitely the rookie RB1, and I think we need to try to make a way to find room in our top 12, top 13 sooner rather than later.
I don't think it's really that hard to explain. Again, you mentioned the volume, and that's really the key thing here. Look, James Robinson wasn't talented enough because clearly they drafted another running back. So the Jacksonville Jaguars, at least the new staff wasn't convinced. But that's the thing. It's all about the volume. And that's what Najee Harris is going to get. There's no one else in that backfield. Like he's going to average 3.5 yards per carry or something like that. It's probably not going to be great, but he can catch passes. And yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And I even think the 3.5, like James Conner averaged 4.3 yards per carry behind that O-line. Steelers were a 12th ranked scoring offense last year. I know it got ugly towards the end of the year, but I just think we're over exaggerating a little bit. But yes, Najee Harris should be consensus rookie RB1. I don't even think people are debating that as much, but I just think in the overall hierarchy, not just rookies, consider pushing him up the ranks. Andrew, who do you have at 2-3 between Javonte and Etienne? I'm assuming those are the 2-3.
Yes. So those are my 2-3. I have Javonte at 2 and then Etienne at 3.
Same page.
That's where I had them before too. And again, their situations are pretty similar. Again, they're both kind of sharing backfields now or potentially in a potential committee with Melvin Gordon for Williams and then obviously James Robinson. But for me, I just thought Williams was the better prospect coming out. So I kind of still lean towards him. And I guess you could argue that, Melvin Gordon's a free agent at the end of this year. There's a new GM that came in. One of his first picks he makes as a running back. They already got rid of Philip Lindsay. So again, they may not be happy with who they have there already. And Pat Shurmur, the offensive coordinator of the Broncos, really has a history of bell cow backs. Like he's really more about the bell cow and not really split time. They didn't really split carries with Lindsay and Gordon last year that much. It was really more Melvin Gordon as the guy. And then it was Lindsay kind of working in periodically at times. But I think that it's going to be Williams that takes over. Again, I still like Etienne too. But I kind of view them pretty similar. And then it's like, if the market is higher on one, I'll probably just be drawn to the other. So I'll probably end up just taking whoever's cheaper.
I wouldn't, he doesn't have the same height, but 2021 Melvin Gordon strikes me as 2020 Leonard Fournette, someone I want under absolutely no scenario, even if they're, deemed a value, like wherever they're kind of falling, because I really don't think the potential is there for a 3-down workload. And it just seemed like a committee back. It's going to get replaced. It would not shock me, man, if Melvin Gordon even gets cut from that late season DUI, if they just don't think he's doing much. I would have thought probably punishment would have come from now, but it's not a good situation. I'm looking over the cap right now. The Broncos could save about $7 million against the cap, only leave $2 million in dead money if they can find a trade partner for Melvin Gordon at some point after June 1st. So unlikely, but I'm with you. I do have Javonte ahead of ETN because from Urban Meyer's lips, I see Carlos and James, the 1-2 downhill powerful running backs, and I see Travis. There's times where he could be in two backs, and Travis is a guy that goes out, or we're still playing with it. But he's certainly a third down back, and he's a guy that's a matchup issue for the defense. I think a lot of that is coach speak. I see Etienne being the undisputed lead back sooner rather than later in that backfield, but I'm going to have them ranked right next to each other. And for me, Javonte's worst case is a 2-back committee, Etienne's 3 backs. So yeah, I'm with you, Javonte. And moving on to 4 and 5, it's Trey Sermon and Michael Carter. Andrew, which one are you ranking ahead?
I have Trey Sermon just narrowly ahead of Michael Carter. I mean, they're pretty close for me. Again, we're pretty clear with the tier. I mean, it's pretty obvious what the running back rankings are, because the NFL was like, all right, these are the guys we actually care about. These are the ones we don't care about, because none of them got draft capital basically, except for the top 3 guys. And then Michael Carter was able to kind of slide in there at the end or the beginning of day 3. But it's just a matter of, if those guys get the action, if they get the ball, then they're going to produce. They're both running in Shanahan-esque offenses with the outside zone. So we know that they're going to be efficient. They were both efficient runners in college when they were featured as the running backs there. So it's really, whoever you like a little bit more. I guess you could say Michael Carter probably has a easier chance of immediate production, but the overall offense may not be as good. Trey Sermon, you might have to wait a little bit more. But again, the 49ers running backs were all hurt last year. I would expect Raheem Mostert still open the season as the starter. But again, he has an expiring contract. He's also 29 years old. So that's obviously up in the air. They like Trey Sermon. And then the Jets obviously like Michael Carter. So it's really close for me, but I guess Sermon, because if they're both established as the workhorses, which ultimately that's what we want, or else it doesn't really matter, it would be Sermon that probably be the better running back.
Going into the draft, I think the 5 kind of backfields we identified as the most fantasy friendly. Top 3 were easily Jets, Falcons, Steelers, and the 49ers and Cardinals were kind of there rounding out the top 5. So it's really not that bad for Sermon. I mean, Mostert, I've been loving Mostert the entire offseason. Every time I do a best ball draft, I try to get that guy. So I'm pounding table for him. But yeah, I do think Mostert's going to be the 1A, and Sermon is likely to be the 1B, and he's going to be involved. So I guess the assumption that I don't like, that I see some people making, is that Michael Carter necessarily has this easier role to like a workhorse type of spot. Like, I don't know, man. Tevin Coleman has a history with LaFleur. He's kind of like Carlos Hyde, where I'm not worried about Coleman, I'm not worried about Hyde, but when you put them with a coach that seemingly likes them, I mean, it doesn't really matter what we think, it matters what that coach thinks, and he brought him in for a reason. There are other guys there, but I just think more than anything, the Shanahans in recent years have used more of a committee system. So even if it's an easier backfield for Carter to quote unquote take over, like, I'm not sure that's even really in his range of likely outcomes, because we could just see them kind of rotating touches between him and who else. So easily big 5. I'm slightly Sermon ahead of Carter with you, but I think more than anything, like, hopefully I'm hoping their ADPs settle kind of hopefully in the low 30 range, because then they're like dream 0 RB candidates. Yeah. We just don't know enough right now to move them up higher.
Yeah, I'm really worried that they're going to go up to like the 4th round, and it's just because that's what happens, because people figure out like we all established him as the guy, and then that's the dead zone. Like that's the RB dead zone, where you just don't get any benefit for the running backs usually taken in that range, because they usually have a lot of downside that people just aren't factoring in because of just the scarcity of the position.
Like it's just a new backfield. We don't have a good feel for it. Week 1's going to come around, and if Michael Carter has an 80% snap rate, there's going to be a lot of victory. A lot of well-deserved victory laps will be taken if you really make a stand on the guy. But just be careful. Those ADPs start shooting up. Just realize these are uncertain situations. As great as these guys could be, it's not a guarantee either one will be starting. Moving on to wide receiver. Andrew, I think there's a tier at 1. Maybe I'm going against the grain here, but I think Jamar Chase is 1A and Devontae Smith deserves to be 1B. Are you with me, or do you think Chase should just be head and shoulders ahead of everyone else?
I think Chase should be in his own tier. I think that's kind of how I've always kind of seen it to an extent, whether it was in dynasty rankings or whether it was in best ball rankings. I mean, I think we talked about it on one of the recap podcasts, but we had him up at like wide receiver 25. And I think that the other rookies for me don't fall until the wide receiver 40 is kind of where I have the other rookie receivers kind of coming in with Smith there as well. So I just think that the Bengals offense is just going to be one of the most fantasy friendly that you could potentially ask for. Their defense is absolutely terrible. They throw all the time, and you have this connection with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I mean, look, it's weird because we haven't seen Jamar Chase play in such a long time, but I just have this feeling that the minute that he steps on the field, we're going to be like, oh my God, like this was the dude in 2019. That's why he won the Blitnikoff. Like this guy is just an absolute monster, and rightfully so. It's going to push guys like Tyler or T. Higgins a little bit to the side. But again, it would not surprise me at all to see the Bengals support 3 top 30 wide receivers. Again, we see this occasionally with 1 or 2 offenses every single season. One that just is so pass heavy and doesn't use a tight end. Sounds a lot like the Bengals.
Yeah, and good points. I have Chase number 1, so don't let this be a reason not to draft the guy. I would just say though, having Higgins, having Boyd, we're probably not going to see Chase just have like 140, 150 targets. And I do think that is in Devontae's potential range of outcomes. If I had to say, gun to my head, who's going to have more targets in 2021, I do think Devontae has more targets. I think Chase is better enough, good enough, and a better offense to warrant the higher ranking. But I do think it's a little bit closer than a lot of guys make it out to be. Are you with me, though, that Devontae over Waddle, Andrew? Again, I like Waddle. If I was running an NFL team, I would pick Waddle to be my wide receiver before Devontae. But just based on the targets, based on the Eagles likely having a far worse defense than the Dolphins, I think Devontae is a safer play than Waddle.
I still have Waddle higher.
So, Andrew.
So the thing with Waddle, I just love his role in the slot. And again, they don't have a lot of possession receivers in the Dolphins offense. Like Devontae Parker was absolutely dust with Tua under center.
He was playing through the pain.
Yeah, he's playing through the pain for the last 5 out of 6 seasons. He's been playing through the pain. That's Devontae Parker. Like I think that his name cachet from that one half of a season, remember, we're only 2 seasons removed from him getting outproduced by Preston Williams, an undrafted wide receiver.
Okay, uncalled for shot at Preston, but your point stands.
Right. But I mean, look, I was on Preston Williams, like heading into net lecture. I liked him a lot more than Parker because I didn't like the matchup with Tua potentially going with a guy like Devontae Parker. Look, Tua doesn't really throw a lot of contested balls. Like that's not his game. He's always had, the PFF Twitter account tweeted out all the Alabama receivers and all their new jerseys. And it's fun and fantastic. But the thing that those guys all have in common is they all can get open. They're all fast. And that's what Jalen Waddle can offer to this offense that wasn't there previously. Again, Will Fuller is there, which I like, but it's between Fuller and I think it's really Fuller and Waddle that are the top 2 guys there. And I just think that Waddle's explosiveness and his usage in the slot, I think that he might have just a little bit more upside. Look, again, there's no denying that Smith is going to lead the Eagles in targets. Yeah. I don't deny that at all. But Hurts. How good is Hurts as a passer? Like realistically. So that's a big question mark.
Yeah. I would say the good thing with Hurts, we've already seen him throw for 300 yards twice. It took us 3 years to be able to say that about Josh Allen. So even if he's not, ever going to be just the most polished passer from the pocket, he can put up numbers when negative game script comes along, which is all we need. You have not changed my mind about putting Waddle over Smith, but I will be moving Waddle up probably the ranks because I don't know, Andrew, I need you to spell it out for me. I guess I didn't realize, looking at Parker, Fuller, Preston, like, my goodness, I don't like the term injury prone, but if there's a more potential injury prone wide receiver room in the league, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure there is outside of Miami. So maybe I'm still bitter that all those last round Lynn Bowden picks are probably going to be going to waste from my pre-draft best ball series. But at a minimum, I do think there should be a tier gap between your wide receiver 3, whoever it is, between Waddle and Smith, and your wide receiver 4, which I'm guessing is Mr. Elijah Moore.
Yes, Elijah Moore is my wide receiver 4. It sucks because I really wanted to put Terrace Marshall somewhere in the top 5, but
can't do it. Dynasty maybe. I think Dynasty is okay.
Dude, I can't get on Sam Darnold, man. I just can't do it. And I think that this is also important. Like right now, it's really, I kind of started looking at this. It's really easy to find a lot of late round quarterbacks you like. It's really easy to paint the picture of, oh, well, this team added these weapons. This team added this weapon. So when we all start to realize that, okay, well, just because they all added weapons, hey, who had good weapons last year? Drew Lock. Just saying. Like,
kind of. Oh, you really want to make that argument against the biggest Drew Lock apologists out here?
Well, I'm just saying.
Yeah, all the 35 snaps you had from Cortland Sutton were awesome, or Jerry Jeudy having 10 drops. I know what you're saying.
But that's why I'm just. So that's with Terrace Marshall. But with Elijah Moore, I think that he fits in really well with Zach Wilson. He's a home run threat from the slot. Zach Wilson's got a rocket arm, go downfield. I've just been hearing some mixed reports about this Jamison Crowder thing. Like it's weird. It's like we have the Zach Ertz thing that's kind of like looming. All right, we know he's going to get traded, but it like hasn't happened yet. So I can't move Dallas Goedert in the rankings like I'd like to. And then Jamison Crowder, I mean, all indications show that he should get cut. Like they saved $10 million. They just drafted a slot wide receiver. Like why wouldn't they do it? But I guess it's not on a time schedule. So I guess because of injuries, it's like, well, we're not going to cut him just because we can cut him whenever. So I guess that's one thing that's kind of concerning.
I guess that's true because that's the confusing part with a lot of these guys. Like, for example, with the Aaron Rodgers trade, it's so unlikely a trade with Rodgers happens until after June 1st, because that way the Packers would be able to spread out his like salary this year and next year and help their cap a lot. And that is the case with a lot of guys. That June 1st deadline, it could become different if they're released before or after. But Crowder, it doesn't matter. They could cut him today and they would save $10 million. They can cut him on July 30th and they would save $10 million. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure what they've waited so long for, but I guess they're not in a hurry. It's just kind of a dick move to not let the guy like go out. You know, like we were all praising, you know, the Texans for being, you know, how classy the Texans were for, you know, letting JJ Watt go pick his destination instead of, you know, actually trying to get something out of him. So maybe they're out here dangling Crowder and trade talks. I don't know, but yeah, Elijah Moore should be in there sooner rather than later. You don't use that early of a pick on a guy to, you know, make him your number 4 receiver, unless you're the New York Giants, potentially. Andrew, number 5 receiver, I think could be where we differentiate. Maybe, I don't know. We haven't looked at each other's lists yet. I have maybe Detroit Lions wide receiver 1, Amon-Ra St. Brown, breaking my rule of top 3 round wide receivers. He did go with, I believe, the 2nd or 3rd pick of the 4th round, but my goodness, man, top 5 wide receivers under contract for the Lions right now. Breshad Perriman, who I like. That's great. Yeah. Tyrell Williams, good when he's healthy. Hasn't been healthy for a while. Khalif Raymond, one-trick pony, field stretcher. And then Quintez Cephas and Victor Bolden, who we don't really need to talk about. So, you know, St. Brown, 5-star, going into UFC, really seems like a guy that will benefit from the slot. And, you know, maybe he's Jared Goff's new Cooper Kupp. Honestly, man, as long as the reviews for any wide receiver going to Detroit weren't just like dog shit, I was going to be on whoever land this situation, because just nobody has more available targets. And as much as I was talking up, you know, the Jets as a potential, again, contrarian, late round, best ball stack, the Lions kind of fit that mold too, man. If you're trying to win $1 million and separate yourselves from, again, tens and hundreds of thousands of other lineups, Jared Goff is going to be chucking the ball around. Go look at the last 5 weeks of 2019, man. He was the QB5 when they were asking him to throw the ball 50 plus times a game. It's going to be ugly, but when you can get the guy in probably the last round of any draft and flank him with Perryman and St. Brown, you know, I'm throwing up my mouth thinking about it. I'm not completely sold on it, Andrew, but somebody is going to produce in this Lions offense. It might as well be St. Brown.
Yeah, we don't post screenshots of our Lion stacks in best ball on the Twitter.
We keep those ones close to the vest.
On the Twitter sphere. Yeah, I like Breshad Perriman a lot, again, because he's going to be the outside perimeter receiver, and Amon St. Brown. So he wasn't a player that I was particularly high on moving in like during the pre-draft process. But again, I'm not going to say, oh, well, I didn't like him, so I'm not going to think that he can be a productive receiver in year 1, because he has arguably the best opportunity, because all the teams that needed wide receivers either drafted terrible wide receivers, Titans, or just didn't draft any receivers at all. So from an opportunity standpoint, I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown does like have leaps and bounds over many of the other rookies. And that's where he's been best from the slot. And that's a position that the Lions didn't fill with Perryman or with Tyrell Williams. But he is not my number 5 because I want to weigh talent a little bit more in this particular exercise. So I'm still going to go with Rashad Bateman with the Baltimore Ravens. I think that the way that the Ravens are constructing this offseason, I think that they're going to try to throw more. Like, there's been so much put on about Lamar Jackson. He can't throw and he can't do this. He can't do that. It's like, guys, he won MVP like 2 years ago. Like, lay off. Like, oh my God. Like, chill out. Well, it's crazy. It's like if he rushes for 100 yards, like, well, he didn't throw for 300 yards, so he has
62 passing touchdowns over the past 2 years. No one's trying to say he's like Mahomes, but can we stop the running back jokes? Like, come on.
It's ridiculous, and that's the thing. Like, if there's one thing that can make up for a lack of volume, is kind of what I figured out, is efficient passer, and I know Lamar Jackson can do that. Like, he's already done it before. And again, I'm not saying he's going to have an absurd touchdown rate, but it's in his range of outcomes. Like, he could definitely have a median between his MVP touchdown rate and last year's, where it really fell off. But, you know, that was to be expected. But if it goes somewhere in the middle, okay, well, Rashad Bateman as a potential, you know, alpha X wide receiver that he came into the draft came out of school as. Like, that's his role. I think that he has a legitimate shot to be their number one wide receiver. So that's kind of why I like Bateman at 5. Just trying to buy the talent. The situation, again, the passing volume is not there, but hoping that Lamar Jackson can kind of vault him up there.
And it's always tough to, again, I'm happy you are adjusting your ranks heavily, as we should, as we all should with these landing spots. Andrew, I know you were super high on our guy, Elijah Herbert. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be talking about him on this podcast for too many more days. The landing spot just matters so much, everybody, and we'll continue to harp on that. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not entirely sold on St. Brown, but I just think that the volume there is enough to win it out. If Bateman can be the number one wide receiver in Baltimore, like, absolutely, I just wouldn't be shocked if, he might not start the season in 3 wide receiver sets. It could be Watkins, Brown, and Duvernay. That just could be. Run first offense, going to be crowded. Maybe the talent wins out. We shall see. If you do believe the talent will win out and you want to put some money behind it, feel free to go over to our friends at Underdog Fantasy. If you like fantasy football, and if you like playing fantasy for money, you need to check out Underdog Fantasy. Underdog's got everything, including season-long and playoff best ball. Best ball is a season-long game where you draft a team like you normally do. But that's it. There's no in-season roster management. Underdog automatically selects your best performers each week, saving you loads of time. So go to Underdog Fantasy, deposit $10 using promo code PFF, and get a free PFF Edge annual subscription. $40 value, everybody. Just $10 at Underdog. Ooh. That's promo code PFF. Draft now at Underdog Fantasy. Andrew, we just went through our top 5 ranks. A few changes here or there, but I don't think we were going too far out on a limb with a lot of those guys. Now, though, I want to go through and pick, we'll discuss more than one guy, but basically give me your favorite non-top 3-round pick for running back and wide receiver. But first, just your non-top first-round pick at quarterback.
So for me, it's going to be Kellen Mond. I think that he offers the most fantasy-friendly skill set of any of the other quarterbacks, whether it's Kyle Trask, Davis Mills. So Mills, like, looking more at him too, he didn't really start that many games in college. So I'm actually not as certain that he's actually even going to start if Deshaun Watson's not there. And it could be, again, this Tyrod Taylor thing, I'm always wrong about Tyrod Taylor. So could be totally wrong here again. But Kellen Mond might offer enough that if Kirk Cousins has a couple bad games here or there, that the Vikings might consider, hey, like, let's go with this kid here. And again, Kirk Cousins kind of gets that mantra. And again, his contract also gets like super expensive. So if the Vikings have an opportunity to look at another quarterback and save potentially, like, I'm pretty sure his contract turns into like $40 million like hit next season. Jeez. So it gets really pricey. And if the Vikings are going in a different direction potentially. So I think I like Kellen Mond.
All right. I got an undrafted free agent I like more than Davis Mills. Because Davis Mills has the best chance to start, 17 games outside of these other guys. But guys, he's just such a statue. Like, okay, if Davis Mills starts 17 games, he's like probably someone that deserves to be ranked as a top 25 QB just because he'll have enough volume to get there. But never, ever would you want to even start him. So, that's just one of those things. We can barely get behind like statue quarterbacks when they're an awesome veteran like Matt Ryan. We just cannot do it on a rookie and arguably the single worst offense in the NFL. So with that said, I think you're right with Mond, but what about Jamie Newman, undrafted free agent with the Philadelphia Eagles? I lost 2 draft prop bets. I mentioned, I think, on one of the shows. I thought Devontae Smith would go over 11.5. I didn't think the Giants needed a wide receiver. We saw how that worked out, so I'll take my L there. My other one, man, I had Jamie Newman, who was a Wake Forest QB from 2017 and 2019, transferred to Georgia, opted out. I thought Jamie Newman would go like before pick 170, ends up not being drafted. So unfortunately didn't get to go in the Todd Monken system and really show what he could do. But you talk about fantasy friendly rushing floor, man, averaged 43.5 rushing yards per game in 19 career contests over at Wake Forest. Jalen Hurts, not exactly playing the best way to not get injured. Some of the hits he's taken out there. Backup is Joe Flacco. Like, Newman could just be their QB3. And after Flacco, has a bad game or two, maybe he's out there sooner rather than later. I think ultimately the answer to who our favorite non-first round QB is probably just no. But Newman and Mond, if you see them popping up later in the season and spot starts, those are the ones that might actually be able to offer us streamer ability.
And also, too, we're going to have preseason DFS this year. And these are going to be the guys that we're going to be looking at. So Jamie Newman, Kellen Mond, that's the other thing, too. Like, we get to have preseason games at all, which can give us an edge in terms of we're not going to get Myles Gaskin again, where Myles Gaskin just comes out and is like, oh, I'm the starting running back. It's like, okay, like that teams aren't going to be able to hide that as much when we actually get to see them. Okay, this is their starting unit, and we'll know that potentially before actual drafts happen. So I think that's a big edge that we'll have.
Tweeting this right now. Jamie Newman is going to be a preseason DFS god. You are so right. Because look, Flacco is like Flacco's their backup. He doesn't need to play a snap in the preseason. They don't want to get hurt. Like, pun intended, whatever. But with Newman, man, he can just be out there for 3 quarters at a time. Okay, we've lost enough listeners talking about preseason DFS here in May. So moving on to running back. Okay, obviously Michael Carter is the number 1 non-top 3 running back drafted, as Kevin Cole brilliantly wrote on PFF.com. Best just, in terms of opportunity score available in any offense for a running back to go into, Jets were number 1. With that said, Andrew, who would be your, I guess, second favorite running back to target that was not drafted inside the top 3 rounds?
So for me, again, it's slim pickings. Like there really aren't that many great options. Again, I wrote down Michael Carter. And I was like, yeah, I don't think Ian's gonna fly with this because I'm pretty sure it's the chalk answer. So I had to come up with another. So I guess for me, it's Romandre Stevenson for the New England Patriots, and it was actually Kevin Cole, one of Kevin Cole's articles that actually pointed out that the Patriots actually have like one of the better strength opportunities for the running back position, and that's pretty wild to think about because you think about the Patriots running backs and you're just like, oh my God, like it's a total mess. Like he can't do anything. But you can see a role where, okay, Sony Michel, like they could just trade him at this point or cut him or do whatever. They're clearly not, I mean, they keep drafting running backs. Clearly they're not invested in Sony Michel. Damian Harris played over him last year. He was hurt again last year. I know that Harris and Michel were both really efficient, but I think that a lot had to do with just, being with a mobile quarterback like Cam Newton, which may not be the case. But look, when I see Romandre Stevenson, all I just think about is LeGarrette Blount. Like I just like see this big masher of a running back. And if Mac Jones is in there, you're not going to have the goal line vulture of Cam Newton. Yeah. And so it could really turn out to be Romandre Stevenson being the touchdown guy for the Patriots, who for all intents and purposes should have a better offense this year with all the upgraded weapons, potentially a better quarterback and more accurate quarterback, moving down the field. Again, I don't know how the offensive efficiency will change between Cam and Mac Jones. Maybe it'll stay the same, but the overall offensive output should be better with just the better personnel around the entire team. Yeah. So Stevenson for me is really interesting because look, the thing, he's different from every other running back in this class besides Harris because he has size. Like every other running back is tiny. Like the receivers are tiny, the running backs are tiny, or Stevenson, like they got him for a reason. And I think that when they're up in games, he's going to be the battering ram that they use. And it would not surprise me at all to see Stevenson have a couple games this season where 20 carries, 100 yards, a touchdown. Again, he's going to have games where he totally flames out if the Patriots are losing because I don't think he's going to be using the passing game that often, but I think Stevenson's a pretty interesting running back.
2016, LeGarrette Blount, 299 carries, 1,100 yards, 18 touchdowns. I would take the under on those for Stevenson, but I do understand your point. It's rare. Again, I think the term vulture is overrated in today's NFL. We don't have guys like Mike Tolbert from back in the day who only come in at the goal line. Maybe that happens if there's a timeout or something, but generally the guy that's out there stays out there. But yeah, man, I mean, out of all these guys, like I'd say Stevenson, I think Kenneth Gainwell is going to be a part of the committee. Those are kind of the only 2 other than Carter that I would expect to maybe
actually play.
To actually play, right. Well, that makes me think, though, I think out of the rest, and again, Eli Mitchell and San Fran, maybe Chris Evans. Chris, he's fine, but he's not going to step into Gio's role, right?
No. Right. No, I don't think. I think that he's going to be just the direct backup. I think if they were going to put anyone in the Gio role, they signed Puka Williams, an undrafted free agent. Like he is just all like scat back. Like he would probably fill him, but Evans would probably be the direct backup to Joe Mixon if there was an injury.
But Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan did tell us on the plan for third down usage among the RBs. I don't want Joe Mixon to leave the field. I think he's up for that challenge. Don't keep telling me, oh, we've heard that story before. Not really, people. Giovanni Bernard has always been on the Bengals. He's been there. He was there for 8 or 9 years. Like, I think before we were just hoping that Mixon would get the role. Now, like the offensive coordinator is telling us he's going to get the role, and we know Mixon has the talent to do so. I mean, don't bring up 2018, 2019 why you shouldn't get on the Joe Mixon train, but we'll talk more about Mixon later. All that to say, I think Chuba Hubbard might be the best back to waste a late round pick on because Mike Davis is gone, man. Christian McCaffrey's handcuff could very well be Chuba for the Panthers to use a 4th round pick on him. I don't even like the prospects necessarily. he's fine. I know he regressed a little bit last year. Maybe he gets back to balling, but again, not going to have any week-to-week touches. I don't think many of these guys are going to have that. Just don't be surprised if he is the man if McCaffrey misses any amount of time. Moving on to wide receiver, we've talked about.
Actually, Ian, I did want to hit on one thing. So I know you mentioned Kenneth Gainwell.
Yeah.
And so the one thing I had, my one issue with Kenneth Gainwell is, so Nick Sirianni's already come out and said that, so the former offensive coordinator of the Colts, he's already come out and said that he wants Kenneth Gainwell to be like Nyheim Hines. So exactly, like my exact reaction. So for me, so I've had Nyheim Hines on the dynasty team probably for like 3 seasons now. I don't think there's ever been one single week where I felt confident in starting him. So I think that's the thing. Like with these running backs, you want to stay out of the middle in terms of their role. Like, I don't care if this running back gets 7 touches a game. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't help us. I want either 0 or like 18. And that's where you're on with Chuba Hubbard, because that's his scenario. Like, don't play at all. Like, that way I know not to start you. But you're going to get teased when Gainwell has a game where he catches 6 passes for 80 yards and a touchdown. You're like, okay, I can start him this week. No, because that's the Nyheim Hines stat line. Yeah. Like, that's exactly what happened. So Kenneth Gainwell, I think, for me, is like someone that he was, a lot of people were higher on in pre-draft, including myself, but after the landing spot and doing a little bit more digging in terms of his role with the offense with the Eagles, I'm just like, gross.
And look, pre-draft, I had Miles Sanders, RB16, James Robinson, RB17. I'm not sure if Robinson's going to be in the top 40. Sanders, I still expect to be the Eagles' RB1, but people, it's not going to be like it was in the past. Hurts is not going to help his target share. It's not going to help his overall rush attempts. And I think under this new coaching staff, we're going to see much more of a committee approach. So Miles Sanders, probably not someone I'm going to be having, because if people want to treat him as an RB2, I think he's probably going to be a little bit closer to RB3 when it's all said and done. Could he handle a 3-down workload? I think so. Let's also not pretend like Miles is this just all-world talent that's been, held back. Only Ezekiel Elliott dropped more passes last year among running backs, and Miles fumbled as many times as Zeke did. Maybe one less. I mean, Zeke. Rough year to be so close to Ezekiel Elliott in some numbers. Wouldn't be so bad maybe in the past, but yeah, man, just nothing against Miles. I just think he's being a little bit overvalued in a new situation on an offense that very well might not be all that good. Moving on to wide receiver, Andrew, we talked about Amon-Ra St. Brown already. Who is catching your eye that was not selected in the top 3 rounds?
It's tough again. So I like Tylan Wallace as a talent, but I also realize that the target share, again, Bateman I can get behind because I think that he can at least start, but then you have Wallace who would even be behind Bateman at this point as a 4th round pick. So again, that one's tougher to get on. So for me, I kind of have to go even deeper, and it's Daz Newsome for the Chicago Bears. He was taken with one of their really late round picks, but he solely played the slot at North Carolina. I could argue that he could have produced better numbers if he hadn't been surrounded by a ton of NFL talent. We've already talked about like half the guys on this podcast, Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, De'Ami Brown, who also got drafted by the Washington football team. So Daz Newsome comes in. They're trying to trade Anthony Miller. There's a potential opening in the slot. We obviously talked about Amon St. Brown as a guy that he's going to get targets from the slot. This could potentially be their fill-in, Daz Newsome. He's a really good punt returner too. And I know that prospects that have special teams ability, that usually comes in really well when they go to the NFL. Deontay Johnson was a really good punt returner. Antonio Brown was a really good punt returner. So as a late flyer, I think Daz Newsome is kind of interesting. Hey, he's attached to Justin Fields. It's not a bad quarterback to be attached to.
I think you nailed it, Andrew. And we also just saw the Chicago Bears take a 5th round wide receiver last year and find a spot for him in 3 wide receiver sets far sooner than we thought. Shout out Darnell Mooney. And yeah, man, Newsome, seems to check the boxes as someone that could start in the slot right away. I have long liked Anthony Miller, but as we've talked about on this pod, the Bears do not at all. There's already been reports they're trying to trade him. A release would not be unexpected. And, if he stays on the team, he might just not play. That's what they generally have done with him over the past 2 years. And as I mentioned, the Chicago Bears player voted most likely to be late to practice, Mr. Anthony Miller. So, hey, maybe Miller, gets his head screwed on straighter and balls out. I'd love to see it, but probably going to be somewhere else, not Chicago. Dez Fitzpatrick, I know people don't love him, but just realize Tennessee before this draft, we all said whatever wide receiver goes there is going to be set up the ball. I think we were all hoping it wasn't going to take him to the 4th round. It was going to be, Elijah Moore, Terrence Marshall, one of these other guys. Unfortunately, it's Dez Fitzpatrick. But hey, let's not write the guy off until we see him play a little bit. If he's out there, starting full time, which I'm not even sure if he's going to surpass Josh Reynolds, we're going to have to get to know him. And then finally, I think Cornell Powell, man, with the Chiefs, we know Tyreek Hill is going to be out there, but wouldn't be completely shocking to see Powell beat out, Byron Pringle, Mecole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson. Again, maybe I'm just putting too much stock in how good he looked against my Buckeyes in that Clemson-Ohio State game. But, dude, the guy is shredded, first team all body. You see the guy, just the pictures. We got the Chiefs Twitter poking around. And, someone's got to replace Sammy Watkins. And they can talk about, Pringle having a chip on his shoulder and all that. But I don't know, man. Cornell Powell, sneaky guy.
So the thing with Cornell Powell that annoys me,
he's old.
He's so old, dude. Super senior, man. He's so old.
This is an ageist podcast, but it's only ageist if we see them play old, Andrew. It's okay. This is why he went to round 5, but it's okay. He's got Patrick Mahomes throwing him the ball.
Okay, yeah, all right. So how have the wide receiver threes done with Patrick Mahomes so far throughout his career? It's been rough so far.
You had to go there.
I mean, I think it's good for Mecole Hardman's a winner. We're getting into some winners later, but Mecole Hardman, okay, they didn't really. I don't think Cornell Powell is a threat to really do anything, in my opinion, just looking at his college production profile. I mean, if Justin Ross had not gotten hurt, would Cornell Powell be in the league at all? Okay. I guess that's my one question with him. And then Des Fitzpatrick, man, he's just a jag, man. I think it's and then they drafted that other guy from LSU. I'm pretty sure he only got drafted because he went to LSU. Dude,
I think he's a special teamer. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just there were plenty of other solid wide receivers still available. And I was just kind of shocked that was the direction the Titans went in. And one thing too that point out is if you look at the receivers that were at the Senior Bowl this year, they were all the ones that got drafted high. It's crazy because it seems like the NFL was just okay, we didn't get to watch any of these guys. We didn't get to meet any of these guys except at the Senior Bowl. So, okay, these are the guys we're ranking, Eskridge, Senior Bowl guy by the Seahawks. It's actually comical to look at the Senior Bowl list and be oh yeah, these are all the guys that all went in day 2. Amari Rodgers, Senior Bowl. Nico Collins. I think Nico Collins deserved it. He deserved it, but Senior Bowl. So yeah, I think it's just really just focus on AJ Brown, Anthony Firkser, even Josh Reynolds. I mean, we joke around about the 200 target thing, but 17 game season, it's probably going to happen.
That is actually very true. Just to be clear, number 1, Amon-Ra St. Brown, easily. Slight little drop off. We got Daz Newsome. Big drop off. Cornell Powell and maybe Des Fitzpatrick. We're going to take a quick break to pay some bills. As soon as I get the ad up, the hits literally keep on coming from one boxing event to the next. They grow in excitement and anticipation. Come on, what the hell is this? And this weekend is no different with 2 of the sport's most respected fighters stepping into the ring Saturday night. There's no better place to get on all the action than with DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app. To celebrate this weekend's huge event, DraftKings Sportsbook is offering new users the opportunity to get 55-1 odds on either main event fighter to win this weekend's fight. Download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code PFF when you sign up. Limited time, all new users can bet $1 to win $55 on this weekend's main event. Who is it? That's right. DraftKings Sportsbook is going all out for new users, offering them a chance to win 55-1 odds, 21 years or older, New Jersey, Indiana, Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Not sure who is fighting this weekend, but as I told you guys before, when the Usman Masvidal card, and I stress, please get Usman because he was a -300 favorite, not because I'm a freaking genius at betting these things. Just before you get that 55-1 odds, don't just pick a fighter. Look at the odds on DraftKings Sportsbook and pick the one that's probably a massive favorite because boxing is half of a fight and usually a pretty rigged sport anyway. So that's that. Andrew, moving on now. We talked about the rookies now. We're going to change pace a little bit. I want to look at the biggest winners from their team not drafting a position. And I mean, look, we could talk about this for an hour. So just kind of focusing on, I guess, maybe one guy per position, and we'll quickly discuss the others. Who at QB do you say, hey, I mean, they have no competition now. Things are looking even better than ever for 2021.
I think it's Matt Ryan. I mean, if they could have drafted Trey Lance, and that could have set him up for, okay, is he going to play the rest of the season, or what's going to happen with him? But instead, they just gave him arguably the best tight end to come out in the history of the NFL in Kyle Pitts. So look, we talk about having the mobile quarterbacks that we want, but if you you can't always get one.
Hold on. That was a hell of a hyperbole you just said right there. Possibly the best tight end to ever come into the NFL. He's just a guy. We'll see. Go on.
He's just a guy, but he's going to make it really easy for Matt Ryan to throw a lot of touchdowns. Look, and I think the biggest thing too is just with Arthur Smith taking over as that offensive or as the head coach, just the play action usage. Like that's the thing that was holding Matt Ryan back. I think the last couple seasons, 21.9% in 2019, 19.6% in 2020, under Smith, Ryan Tannehill led the NFL in play action percentage, 36% 2020. And Matt Ryan's been, in the low end 20 percentage the last couple seasons. And you look back to Kyle Shanahan, that was when Matt Ryan was all about play action. So with more weapons, if they keep Julio, I think Matt Ryan has a chance to, again, throw for like 5,000 yards.
Yeah, I had Matt Ryan number 2, but just because I think he probably would have been a strong candidate to start anyway. But it is good they got him Pitts instead of like Lance. I hear what you're saying there. Other honorable mention guys: Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater, assuming a certain Green Bay quarterback doesn't eventually make his way to Denver. Sam Darnold, obviously. Look, Andrew, it's like the opposite of the "I can't quit you" meme. It's like I can't quit you, Sam Darnold, and I want to keep doing so. But the more they keep surrounding this guy with good play callers and weapons.
Well, at least they're going to know. They're going to know like right away. It's like, okay, did it work?
We already know Sam Darnold's going to play lights out in the preseason too, which is going to make this like even harder to wrap our minds around. But things are looking, it's objectively good for Sam Darnold. All these things have been good for his process. No doubt about that. Jalen Hurts, more guys that we can start again getting just fully behind if we want to because of the lack of competition. Jared Goff, LOL, talked about him. Don't need to really go much more into that. The main winner, in my opinion, was Mr. Ryan Fitzpatrick. We didn't know what Washington was going to do there. And Fitzpatrick, as kind of the bridge QB that, Rivera already has said it's going to be a competition. But Fitzpatrick, look, Taylor Heineke played his ass off in that playoff game. That's great. Fitzpatrick should be the man, and that is great news in fantasy, ladies and mostly gentlemen. QB2 in weeks 7 through 17 in 2019. QB8 in weeks 1 through 6 before he lost his job to Tua. Look, he was coming in like fourth quarters, halfway through the third, and like really playing well consistently despite having these awful situations and the same horrendous receivers that Tua was being forced to throw to. So, man, Fitz, I know earlier in his career, he was much more boom or bust, but we've only seen mostly the former here in recent years. Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, one of my favorite picks, Diami Brown coming in. I know we didn't talk about him with the rookies, but I think Diami Brown, your guy, Josh Palmer, are probably, in that 6, 7, 8 range if we're looking at guys for this year. So all great things there for Ryan Fitzpatrick. And, I think him and Matt Ryan should be right around, and honestly, man, like I know we want to rank Fields and Lawrence, right kind of around that QB1 borderline, but that means putting them ahead of Ryan and Fitzpatrick. It's something worth taking a long look at.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to figure out where to place the rookies with the mobile upside versus the less mobile statue quarterbacks that just project to be, really efficient, that have like tons of weapons and things like that. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that there's a lot of late round quarterbacks that look really nice right now on paper. So you really need to be kind of maybe not having all the weapons isn't really enough anymore, because there's a lot of quarterbacks that have a lot of really great weapons. So I think it's important to really be particular with who you decide to go with. Because look, Sam Darnold, you look at his weapons, you're like, oh my God, like this is great. But then make sure you look at all the other quarterbacks and their weapons first before you're like, yeah, no, Sam Darnold getting back on. It's like, okay, wait, hold on. Hold the phone.
All right, people, moving on to the running backs. I told you about a month ago that Chris Carson was an RB1 for me. RB12 specific, but if you're 1 through 12, that counts as an RB1. I was mocked by some of you on Twitter, and that's okay. I enjoy our discourse. Feel free to keep hating. It's all good. I'm not losing any sleep. Andrew, Chris Carson looks like a freaking big winner, man. Not only was Rashad Penny's 5th-year extension decline, not only did the Seahawks let Carlos Hyde walk, not only did they re-sign Chris Carson, they had not even added a single running back to this room. Chris Carson last year was healthy in weeks 1 through 5. He was a PPR RB5 in weeks 1 through 5. He comes back in week 12. He's playing hurt. Like first game back, was on the field, fewer than 40% of snaps. Didn't matter. He was still the PPR RB12 from weeks 12 through 17 last year. Seahawks, what'd they say right after the season? They want to run the ball. They somehow fired Brian Schottenheimer to find someone else that will run the ball more, which I did not even know was possible. So look, I don't know if they're going to be able to run the ball that much. We talked about the Seahawks and Titans, teams that want to run the ball, but you look at their defense and you're like, I'm not so sure it's going to be able to happen for you, bro. Carson, he's their pass down back. He's their early down back. He is their 3-down back in an offense that we consistently see be a top 10 scoring unit with Russell Wilson under center. What am I missing, Andrew? Like, I get it. He's getting a little bit older. It sucks he's been banged up, but he's been nothing but an RB1 when he's been on the field for like 3 straight years.
The list of running backs that actually play 16 games or 17 games is very short. Like, there are not that many running backs that do it. So that shouldn't be your goal, to find a running back that can last the whole season. You know who lasted the whole season? Devin Singletary. You can draft him. You feel great about it. But
there we go.
If you have Chris Carson, you're going to get 12 weeks of RB1 production. And that's what we care about. If anything, he's shown that he can play banged up, which not all running backs can do. Some running backs lose efficiency and aren't nearly as good or nearly as productive. But this is a high-power offense. So whether they are cooking by throwing or cooking by running the football, it's going to benefit Chris Carson either way. I mean, I think they've finally come to grips that Rashad Penny is just not going to be their guy. I mean, they rejected his, like you mentioned. So I think that's pretty clear to me that they're not going to try to make him a thing. They're kind of ready to kind of like, all right, well, we're done with our former first round pick, kind of like the Patriots that seemed like with Sony Michel. So yeah, you don't have to convince me. And someone was saying that like they had just moved Chris Carson ahead of Miles Sanders after Kenneth Gainwell got drafted. And I was like, I did this like 2 months ago.
Now, Carson, I don't want to hurt myself patting myself on the back. We'll find out in a few months how right or wrong I am with this. But there are several other running backs who we both and the whole community were much lower on that now we can, I think, afford to get higher on. I'm just going to list some and then feel free to go off on kind of one that you feel particularly good about. But under the radar, the Bills, we've talked about them being a nice little 0 RB team. Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, when you do these best ball drafts, you'll see how just late they are still available. And I get it. Josh Allen, he does not like checking the ball down. He likes taking off inside the 10-yard line. I wouldn't be shocked if we see him, as he continues to progress as a passer, become a little bit less Josh Allen. I just don't know if he's going to push for 10 rushing touchdowns every year. Like, is that seriously possible from a human being? Maybe if it is, it's Josh Allen can achieve it. But again, when you're getting these guys at such a discount, I do think they make sense as 0 RB targets with ADPs into the 30s. Myles Gaskin, Mike Davis, huge winners. Myles Gaskin last year, the RB12 in PPR points per game. Mike Davis finished as the actual PPR RB12 behind Christian McCaffrey. Hate on his home run ability all you want. I think we always say 40 times don't matter for running backs, but then everyone wants to talk about their home run ability afterwards. So freaking make up your minds, everybody. Antonio Gibson, sneaky winner. I always thought it was weird when people were projecting like ETN to Washington or whatever, but they didn't add anybody. So if JD McKissick can just chill the hell out, we still got a chance for Gibson to become the DC CMC workhorse we've been hoping for. Tampa Bay backfield, still a mess, but at least we don't have someone else to deal with there. And finally, Chase Edmonds, who we talked about a little bit, Andrew, where, Rondale Moore, certainly a candidate to steal some of those targets, and James Conner being there isn't the most ideal thing, but the fact they didn't add a true running back in the top 2 rounds is objectively good news for Chase Edmonds. So feel free, floor is yours. Who kind of sticks out from that group?
I think it's for me. I mean, Myles Gaskin has been someone that I have been trying to advocate for people to try to go out and acquire and draft. I know that before the draft last week, we published an article about, a dynasty buy Myles Gaskin, because I was convinced. I looked at Chris Greer, his track record running backs, basically since they drafted Ronnie Brown, 2nd overall, the Miami Dolphins, they just stopped drafting running backs. They drafted Kenyon Drake in the 3rd round, but after that, they just kind of stopped. And it makes sense from an analytically driven franchise that they would not invest in the running back position. That's exactly what they've done. They drafted a guy in the 7th round again. His name is escaping me. But again, I think that they showed us last year that they really like Myles Gaskin. I know you mentioned he was top 12 in fantasy points per game. So that's something that's really important to pay attention to. But again, even like touches, he was averaging 18.3 touches per game. That's more than Alvin Kamara. That's just 1 less touch than Ezekiel Elliott. Like, this is Myles Gaskin. And it was whenever he was healthy, whenever he was available, he was their workhorse. And the big difference between him and like a James Robinson was James Robinson beat out nobody last year. Right. Raquel Armstead got COVID and didn't play. And then there was no one else there. Myles Gaskin beat out Jordan Howard, who rushed for 1,000 yards in the NFL. Like, we can make fun of Jordan Howard we want, but he did that. Like, he's a legitimate NFL running back. And the same thing with Matt Breida.
Was there. Yeah, exactly.
So he beat out legitimate NFL talent where James Robinson didn't. So it's not surprising for me that James Robinson is the one that now has competition and Myles Gaskin doesn't. Great
points all around, Andrew. And I do just want to bring up one guy who I mentioned earlier, but Yeah, Joe Mixon, people, just in terms of total touches, it's adding up. He was number one in the NFL in touches before he got hurt. And, once again, people are going to say, look at the O-line. What about the O-line? We know the guy can catch the ball. We know he's going to be the RB1 on an extending offense. Don't be afraid to go back to well with Joe Mixon. He is a winner from this draft with only Chris Evans being added. Now, for the wide receivers, I'm going to run through some of my notes here. As you said, Andrew, AJB 200 target season. Fully in the works, feeling good about that. The second Aaron Rodgers, that saga is truly solved, people. Like, if Devontae Adams is not catching balls from Aaron Rodgers, like we've kind of joked around about AJB, the wide receiver one. No Aaron Rodgers, no longer a joke. AJB will be the wide receiver one in fantasy land. I cannot wait. The Patriots not only did not add a receiver, but they added Mac Jones, potentially turn this into more of a pass-first offense. I think Nelson Aguilar has a chance to be a steal where he's currently going. You can keep doing the dropping baby meme all you guys want. It's funny. We can laugh, but just realize 2020 Nelson Aguilar, despite some drops here and there, was making a lot of big plays downfield, explosive guy, and he should be the number one receiver in that offense. Indy, Jacksonville, Raiders, more offenses that didn't add anyone. Look for their incumbent guys to take steps forward. I know Indy and Vegas are so crowded, but Jacksonville, DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, guys I'm really going to be rising up through the process. Talked about Detroit already, Breshad Perriman maybe being a winner. The Saints only took a round 7 guy. Andrew and I, we aren't thrilled about Traquan Smith, but he is someone that, we do see the value go up. And this one surprised me. I must have missed it. The 2 free agent signings that I just did not remember happening and then was kind of shocked to see them. It was when Joe Flacco, I found out he was a member of the Eagles, and I was like, hold on, when, how, why? I got that figured out. And the other one that happened today was that Mohamed Sanu is back on the 49ers, man. Like, shit, is he really going to be their starting slot receiver in the year 2021? Oh, maybe, but they did not take a receiver, which is good. Objectively good news for Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. But if you're like me and did not know Mohamed Sanu is out there, maybe we'll get some of his, token Wildcat snaps with launching a nice deep ball down the field if they don't feel like letting Jimmy G do that. I said a lot there, Andrew. What situations do you want to kind of focus in on?
Yeah, so I think that Michael Thomas is just so underrated again, or not really again. Like last year, he was a wide receiver 1 overall, and now he's basically getting back in the 3rd round. So for me, we've said this on the podcast before, but you want to get AJ Brown and then you want to draft Michael Thomas because the guy, again, he's actually got he's got his 2019 season had to get 185 targets. I get people are concerned about the quarterbacks, I guess, but when he played with Taysom Hill was targeting him like no one else, and Jameis Winston. We have a track record of him supporting 2 wide receiver 1s with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. So, I mean, look, Drew Brees, yes, he targeted Michael Thomas a lot, but he also was targeting him 5 yards downfield. So there's an element of upside now with Michael Thomas who, yes, he's not known as a deep threat receiver, but he's just never been asked to do it because his quarterback, that wasn't part of the offensive game plan. Like, it's going to be part of it, especially because you mentioned, is Traquan Smith the number 2 guy? Okay, that usually means it's going to be Michael Thomas. Look, a lot of times we try to find, these number 2 guys, but more often than not, it ends up being just more targets for the alpha. Like the alpha just kind of, and especially when we know the alpha, who we already know who it is. It's established. Yeah. So with Michael Thomas, with AJ Brown, I think it's pretty clear. And then you mentioned the Jaguars. So the Jaguars are really weird because if you look at their vacated targets from last season, they ranked 3rd in terms of target percentage of vacated targets, which is really weird because you look at their depth chart, you're like, who did they lose? It's like, they just got rid of all of the low-hanging fruit that were getting targets. Like Keelan Cole is gone.
Chris Conley's
gone. It's weird because you'd think, wait, those guys were getting targets, but yeah, they were legitimately really getting targets. So for them to not add a receiver, I think until the 7th round. So I guess really nobody, Shenault, just praying that Urban Meyer doesn't like Shenault or something because he wanted to replace him with Kadarius Toney. Hoping that's not a thing, but it's good. It seems like both those guys are going to get a lot of volume.
Well, that problem doesn't exist. Yeah. That was you said before, starting to worry about Urban Meyer when he's that distraught over not getting Kadarius Toney. It's like, Urban? Why is that? Urban, why are you that upset about Kadarius Toney? Aaron Rodgers, why are you that upset about Jake Kumaro? Just, kind of classic why the F was it between Muhammad and McLovin type vibes going on there. Quickly, again, just to conclude some of these big veteran winning wide receivers. Nelson Aguilar, seriously, people, one of the cheaper number 1 receivers we're going to be able to get now. I think a similar sentiment can be said for Breshad Perriman. And Laviska Shenault and DJ Chark are going to be guys I'm going to be trying to probably not quite wide receiver 2 land, but, high end wide receiver 3s I'm going to actively be targeting. Last point, got a quote from John Lynch, who might know something about this situation, but John Lynch said, let me find it, that the 49ers are encouraged by Jalen Hurd's rehab, and they think he will be ready to go.
Oh, man.
Jalen Hurd, for those that don't know, split carries with Alvin Kamara. So you already know I'm sold on this guy because he's your typical RB wide receiver hybrid that I just get infatuated with. Split carries with Alvin Kamara at Tennessee, comes out as a wide receiver, misses his whole first year because of injury. He's coming on came on in the preseason his first year, had 2 touchdowns against the Cowboys, was looking good. Gets hurt, misses that whole season, misses all of last season. But Andrew, he's coming back. I'm not sure where all these touches are going to come from. I'm not saying you should go draft this guy, but I am saying I'm excited to maybe watch Jalen Hurd play regular season football.
I mean, Jalen Hurd is he's either better than Alvin Kamara, or the coach of Tennessee is just an absolute moron.
Bro, imagine Kamara again, first team all swag, and you're putting the 6'4", 220 guy out there, and not even Kamara was objectively better than Hurd at Tennessee, but it wasn't like Hurd wasn't doing anything. I mean, it's a fun highlight tape to watch if you're bored at midnight me sometimes. Tight end position, I'm gonna reel off some of the big winners. Anthony Firkser, he arguably regardless of position, one of the biggest winners here. With Jonnu Smith gone, we're fully expecting Firkser to be the guy in that Tennessee tight end room. My guy, Chris Herndon, is once again back in action, looking good. The Jets did not draft a tight end. I just have this sick feeling in my stomach that we could see Zach Ertz make his way over to gangrene. That's going to be a sad day. I can just see my mentions being flooded right now. But right now, people, I know I let a lot of you down last year, and you wasted those 15-round picks on Chris Herndon. All I'm saying this year is you can get him around 17. So don't be so quick to say no. I do worry, looking at the Bengals and the Cowboys, you could say that them not drafting Pitts was good, but I would just caution Uzoma, Blake Jarwin coming back from injuries, Drew Sample and Dalton Schultz, respectively, were good enough last year in their absence that I think we could see a little bit more of a 50-50 split. And again, all these wide receivers to throw to in these offenses, even with pass catching backs, I'm not going out of my way to get a Cincy or Dallas tight end, even though I do see the scenario where it could work out. Adam Troutman with the Saints looking good. I mean, not having the wide receiver added means he could theoretically be their number 3 pass game option behind Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. And finally, with the Rams, man, not only did Gerald Everett leave, but they really just declined to replace him. So Tyler Higbee also popping as a post hype guy. All right, it's always a little tongue in cheek with Chris Herndon. Please take Ferkser, Higbee, and Troutman ahead of Chris Herndon. I'm not trying to, screw everyone over again, but I will say, I was just doing a best ball draft. There will be situations where all these people are gone. You need a third tight end. Chris Herndon can be your tight end 3 in a best ball tournament, Andrew. How's that for going out on a limb for a guy?
Dude, I don't draft 3 tight ends in best ball, only 2. So Herndon's going to be my number. Herndon's going to be my number 2 guy. But
there we go. Okay. You had me in the first half, but it ended up being okay.
But you can't forget about our guy, TJ Hawkinson, they need to get him a life jacket because he's going to. So that's the thing with him.
And targets.
So he's basically, he's like my Kyle Pitts cutoff. So I think the highest I can rank Kyle Pitts is 5, regardless of however situations play out, Julio Jones is gone or whatever. So I will easily rank Kyle Pitts over Mark Andrews, over Goddard, depending on how situations shake out. But Hawkinson's kind of like my cutoff because I think Hawkinson legitimately has the chance to see so many targets in that offense. He fits really more stylistically with what Jared Goff does. Jared Goff doesn't really throw the ball downfield a lot. It's really more in that intermediate to short level where he actually was decent in terms of PFF grade from 10 to 19 yards downfield. Perfect for tight ends. Hawkinson is someone that I'm just super excited. And he doesn't cost what it costs to put up Waller or the stats that Waller have or George Kittle or Kelsey. Hawkinson, I think the 4th or 5th round, I think is just absolute money.
I am with you. And look, people, do you remember why Tyler Higbee was randomly the tight end 6 last year going in. It was because of that stretch he had at the end of 2019 with nobody else to throw to. And we saw Goff enable Higbee to 4 straight games with over 100 yards and then only 8 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown in the final week. So it's a new offense, but right now the lead projected target leader in anyone's book is TJ Hawkinson. And we do know Goff, when asked to, with one tight end, can enable one fantasy. So great stuff there. All right, everyone, we're going to close things out here with a look at our favorite and least favorite draft from, again, a real life perspective, not so much with the fantasy. So Andrew, hit me with your favorite and least favorite draft.
So I think the one I have is pretty chalky, but I think it's pretty clear. It's the Chicago Bears getting Justin Fields, trading up for him, doing whatever it can to make Andy Dalton not their starting quarterback. I think that was just such a super smart move by them. Ryan Pace, again, he's made a lot of draft picks that have not worked out, but this was one of them that was really smart to do because his job is on the line. Like he doesn't really care about the first round picks next year because he may not be here. So to get Justin Fields makes a lot of sense. And then to follow it up with Tevin Jenkins as right tackle. I know I had Tevin Jenkins mocked to them as like their first round pick. So to shore up the right offensive part of their line, which was literally disastrous, it's such a good move. Again, go back with another offensive tackle, and then to come back with my guy Khalil Herbert, who I think can be a decent, backup to David Montgomery. So excited to play him in preseason DFS. And then I mentioned Daz Newsome as well. They got themselves a decent slot receiver there in one of the late rounds.
I did go to college on a South Side Chicago school, and all my friends were just absolutely thrilled with the Bears draft. First time in a while I've seen a Chicago Bears faithful so thrilled. I'm happy it happened. And also as a, Columbus, Ohio lifer, as I like to bring up, I'm happy to see Justin Fields in a situation where he should be under center sooner rather than later. I'm going to go with the Chargers. I think kind of the consensus big three. If you can check out on PFF.com. We do have, classic token draft grades for everyone that's into that. And the Chargers, Bears, and Browns were the 3 teams, I believe, that came away with A+ grades. But yeah, man, for the Chargers, I mean, they always seem to get like the awesome non-quarterback that just, not taking anything away from Herbert, but between like Joey Bosa, Derwin James, and now Rashawn Slater, they just always seem to get the guy that like slides into the teens and they're just happy to scoop him up at value. So Rashawn Slater at 13, absolutely fantastic. Asante Samuel Jr. is someone that, on our PFF draft show, Darius Butler was saying he thought Samuel should have gone in round 1 over some of the guys that were taking. To get him in round 2 to replace Casey Hayward is fantastic. Josh Palmer, your guy's an upgrade at wide receiver 3. We'll see how many targets he gets behind Mike Keenan and Eckler, but at a minimum, he's going to be a nice real life upgrade, I think, over Guyton and Tyron Johnson. And, they just continue to fill out the defense afterwards. So please, football guys, I'm knocking on wood, but keep Joey Bosa and Derwin James healthy for 1 year. And maybe, just maybe, this Chargers team that every single year looks so good on paper coming into it can actually turn that into some playoff success. We shall see. My bad team, I guess, I go with the Cardinals, man. I don't trust Cliff to use Rondale more properly. I think that's just where it kind of comes down to. Like, great player. I get it. As Austin Gale said, Calvin Johnson's stuck in Wes Welker's body, and I'm not willing to say that's not true, but I remember when draft Twitter was all over Andy Isabella. Some were calling him the number 2 receiver in that class. And when he fell to Arizona, it was, everyone was so pumped because there was no target competition at all. Now there's more target competition because AJ Green got like 7 or 8 million somehow. I have no idea why anyone would pay him that much money after last year, but he's there. We have DeAndre Hopkins, who commands arguably the most target share in the league. He's there. Incumbent starter, Christian Kirk. And then we got more guys like Isabella that could just feasibly keep Rondale off the field. So maybe, fake sharp Cliff turns it around and he gets sharp and all that, but I just don't quite buy it, man. And then, the first round LB, Zaven Collins, look, 6'5", 270 with coverage skills. He might very well be a great player, but there might not be a more sorry cornerback room in the league right now, man. And for them to only really address that with a 4th and 6th rounder, we got Robert Alford, Malcolm Butler, and Byron Murphy starting right now, man. That's going to be DFS heaven, playing wide receivers against this Cardinals team. So, hey, maybe the front 7, they got Chandler Jones back healthy. So maybe they're just trying to get the pass rush juiced up enough so that they can, help ease up the coverage concerns. But I would certainly like to see them have both situations a little bit more under control. So really going through the drafts, I was surprised I didn't see more train wrecks. Some teams, like the Rams or the Texans, like you're not thrilled about it, but they just didn't really have many picks to work with. So, I don't want to come down too hard on the Cardinals, but just based on those first 2-round picks, I don't think they did a good job really filling some of their major holes. Any other team that really pissed you off, Andrew?
Giants. I really wanted to draft lineman, honestly, because I thought, as a Daniel Jones stan in my own right, I really think that they need to protect him a little bit better. They say that they're confident in the guys that they have, and that's the reason why they didn't, add anyone to the O-line. But, Darrisaw was there, available for them at pick 20, and they chose Kadarius Toney. And again, like you mentioned with Rondale Moore, look, this Giants offense, it just looks stacked on paper. It's stacked. And then you got Kadarius Toney, and then you have Jason Garrett. Like he's literally the question mark. And it sucks because we can do all of the analysis we want about, Daniel Jones and how great he is throwing downfield and how they can use Kadarius Toney in the screen game and the pat. But it doesn't matter, because if Jason Garrett doesn't do what he needs to get done, then it's all going to crumble. So
yeah, I was literally just talking to Josh Norris about this before this podcast, and he was saying how, everyone sees Andy Reid getting Mecole Hardman, and they want to get their, gadget speed guy to kind of replicate that. And we were both just like, okay, Andy Reid can't make it work. Like, what's Jason Garrett and Daniel Jones going to do? Like, no way.
Yeah. So for me, it's like Kadarius Toney just has, it sucks because I hate to bury a guy before he's even literally stepped on the field, but I just find he's going to be facing a very uphill battle to be even a fantasy relevant guy. He was a first round pick, so that's going to be attractive to a lot of people. But again, there's too many targets in the offense that are going to be going away from him, and I don't see it really working super, super well. And they also drafted Azeez Ojulari from Georgia, but if you look at the last couple Georgia guys that they've drafted, really hasn't worked out well. I don't know what. I mean, Dave Gettleman clearly knows someone at Georgia, and that's why he keeps continuing to draft Georgia Bulldogs. But one of them, I can't remember it, but one of the guys was the cornerback that got arrested and is literally not even in the league anymore. So a lot of I don't know who he's talking to at Georgia and the information he's getting in, but it clearly hasn't been working super, super well. So that's something that I didn't really like either. And just them not addressing the offensive line, I just think was a big no-no, because that's what they needed to upgrade with, and they just didn't do it. And there was a guy that was clearly there. If Darrisaw had been gone or whatever, okay, I get the pick, adding a receiver, but I mean, I would have added a different receiver altogether. So
I think a similar sentiment could be said for the Steelers. Najee and Freiermuth, I think a great running back and great tight end, but if you look at what they probably needed more so, it would be linemen. Credit to them for spending on the position rounds 3 or 4, but man, we're pretty much looking like a 2020 Rams situation where it was a bad offensive line last year. They haven't put many resources into it. We're just going to have to kind of hope that some of the incumbent guys can step their game up. Not impossible. And, I'm not, again, don't fade a high volume running back just because they're O-line people, but I do think the Steelers probably deserve to be in that worst draft class conversation. That's going to do it, everybody. Thank you for tuning with us on the 76 and going minute long podcast. Andrew, good stuff as always, bud. What do you got on PFF.com this week?
So just a couple of recaps, winners and losers from the draft, talking about fantasy breakouts, fantasy non-breakouts, who's going to disappoint. And I actually did the UDF tracker. So it's over on PFF.com.
Nice.
I was searching for it. I couldn't find it. Talked to Austin. You can do it, Andrew. So I just spent, 2 hours searching the internet, Twitter, to figure out all these undrafted free agents. So it's up there. It's live, the tracker. The Patriots at this time have not added anybody. They're the one team that has 0 UDFA ad additions, just Belichick doing his thing. I don't know why, but once I know it, the tracker will be updated.
Bill just went crazy day one of free agency so we could start vacation early, does the draft, and he's like, I'm done. We got our guys. We'll see what goes on there. We got our opt-outs coming back this year, but yeah, everyone make sure you check that great stuff out from Andrew and at Andrew Erickson _ on Twitter. I have my top 5 rookie QBs, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends for 2021. An article went up this morning at PFF.com. We'll have a veteran piece on Wednesday and my updated top 150 ready for Friday. And people, tentatively, we are scheduled to have none other than Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins on the podcast. It's Friday. Very excited to ask him 10 questions about this and that, and maybe get us some, good dirt, if that's the right word, on some fantasy stuff going next year.
Yes.
So fingers crossed that comes to fruition. Thank you as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. He's Andrew. I'm Ian. Until next time, take care, everybody.